United States versus Susan B. Anthony. I see them above. Time, November 1872 to July 1873. The parlor of the Anthony home, 7 Madison Avenue, Rochester, New York. Other locations are Henry Sullivan's office, Rochester, New York. West End News Depot, Polling Place, Rochester, New York. The Circuit Court for Northern District of New York, Canandaigua, New York. Act 1, Scene 1, setting the parlor of the Anthony home. At Rise, Mary's at the front window looking out.
Susan? Susan, where are you?
In the dining room.
Would you come here for a minute, please? There's a man coming up the walk.
What is it, dear?
Do you know him? Does he look familiar?
That's Mr. Keeney. Mary Hebart, am I right?
Yes, that's Elijah Keeney. He used to be the chief of police. I think he's a deputy marshal now.
Well, he is. Mr. Keeney is the man who arrested me. We saw quite a lot of each other for a while.
Well, I wonder what he wants.
Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon, Mr. Keeney. You remember my sister Mary?
I do. Good afternoon, Miss Anthony.
Mr. Keeney?
And Mrs. Hebart. Her husband Charles is the editor of the Evening Gazette.
I know Mr. Keeney quite well.
To what do we owe the pleasure of your visit?
Not a pleasure, ma'am. Unfortunately, I am here on official business.
You're not going to arrest me again, are you?
No, we're all done with that. I'm here for the fine.
The fine?
The $100 that the court ordered you to pay, I have been directed to collect it from you.
I told the court I wouldn't pay it.
I realize that, but you are still liable for it. You were convicted.
Convicted.
The court found you guilty.
The judge ordered the jury to find me guilty.
The question, gentlemen of the jury, is wholly a question of law, and I have decided, as a question of law, that under the 14th Amendment, which Miss Anthony claims protects her, she was not protected in a right to vote. The result on your part must be a verdict of guilty.
Well, what did you think of that, Mr. Keeney? Was it not an unusual practice in a court of law?
It was somewhat unusual.
I told the judge I wouldn't pay his unjust fine, and I shan't. I can't. $100, that would be 6 weeks' salary if I were teaching, and I haven't taught in years.
But don't you own this house?
No, my mother bought the house. My sister pays taxes. I am just the boarder.
What about that speaking tour you did to raise money for your defense? You spoke in 21 different towns. You must have made money from that.
Oh, that money is gone. 21? You remembered that?
You gave me your itinerary before you left. You were supposed to be in my custody.
I know you weren't pleased.
Strictly speaking, you should have been in jail.
Strictly speaking.
It was the most lenient detention I ever administered.
I thank you for your leniency, but I still refuse to pay the fine.
Mr. Keeney?
Yes, ma'am.
My sister was not the only one who voted. I did. Mary Hebart did.
I certainly did.
11 other ladies did as well. Why were the rest of us not convicted?
Ma'am, I just carry out the orders of the court.
And your orders were to harass my sister because she's the one to be made an example of.
No one told me to harass Miss Anthony.
But that's exactly what you're doing. You came to collect a fine that she can't pay. My sister doesn't have 2 dimes to rub together.
Mary?
I'm the one who should be fined. I earn a salary. I pay the taxes on this house. The one you should be coming for is me.
But you weren't convicted.
But I voted. All 14 of us did. If it was a crime to vote, then every one of us is a criminal. Is that not so?
It may be, but the prosecutor decided not to proceed against the rest of you. Noli prosequi. I don't know all of the Latin legal terms, but I do know that one. Noli prosequi. Do not prosecute. It was noli prosequi for everybody but your sister.
And now you've come for the money she hasn't got. Is that fair?
Fair or not, ma'am, it's what I have to do.
Mr. Keeney, if I am not able to pay, what happens?
In the case of failure to pay the fine assessed by the court, I am required to take measures.
What measures, Mr. Keeney? Mr. Keeney, what measures?
To the Honorable Senate and House of Representatives of the United States and Congress assembled, The undersigned citizens of the United States, believing that under the present federal Constitution, all women who are citizens of the United States have the right to vote, pray your honorable body to enact a law during the present session that shall assist and protect them in the exercise of their right.
Petition to Congress from the National Women's Suffrage Association, meeting in Hartford, Connecticut, December 12, 1871.
Lights down. Scene 2, setting, the same Friday, 1st November 1872, about 6:45 a.m. At Ron, Susan is standing at the desk reading a newspaper.
Mary, come look at this.
Well, just a minute. What is it?
Read this article.
Now register. Today and tomorrow are the only remaining opportunities. If you were not permitted to vote, you would fight for that right, undergo all privations for it, face death for it. You have it now at the cost of 5 minutes' time to be spent in seeking your place of registration and having your name entered. And yet, on election day, less than a week hence, hundreds of you are likely to lose your votes because you have not thought it worthwhile to give the 5 minutes. Today and tomorrow are your only opportunities. Register now.
What does that suggest to you?
Nothing. It's about voting. We can't vote.
It doesn't say we can't. It says hundreds of you are likely to lose your votes, not hundreds of you men.
Well, I mean, it can say whatever it wants. We're still not allowed.
I say that we are.
You would. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that this is an opportunity, but only if we latch onto it. Will you come with me
Where?
to the polling place
For what?
to register? It's on West Avenue, 6 minutes walk.
It's a weekday. I have school.
The polling place opens at 7. School begins at 8. You have an hour.
I have things to do.
Oh, nonsense. If we hustle, we can be there before they open. You'll be at school in time for the Pledge of Allegiance.
What if we're challenged? What will we say?
We'll say that we have the right to vote.
Based on what?
The 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment doesn't say anything about voting.
No, it doesn't. But it does say, once and for all, who is a citizen? Any person born or naturalized in the United States. We are American-born women, therefore we are citizens. It also says that the privileges and immunities of citizens shall not be abridged.
Privileges and immunities. Does that include the right to vote?
I say it does. It's up to them to say it doesn't.
Them? Who are they?
Whoever might try to stop us. You have to register in order to vote. The newspaper says so. If you are not permitted to vote, you would fight for the right, undergo all privations for it, face death for it.
Penny dreadful crows. They don't have the first idea what it's like not being permitted to vote.
Would you face death for it?
Would you?
What do you think? Will you come with me, Mary?
I suppose if I didn't, I would never forgive myself.
That's the idea.
I'll have to get my hat.
And I'll get mine. We'll call it Mary Hebard's on the way. If we're going to get into trouble, we can use some company.
I long to hear that you have declared an independency. And by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put unlimited power in the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice.
Abigail Adams to John Adams, Braintree, Massachusetts, March 31st, 1776.
Lights down. Scene 3, setting, the same about an hour later. At Ron, Susan, Mary, and Mary Hebard enter.
Success!
We did it!
We did. We're registered to vote in Tuesday's election.
It wasn't easy, Susan.
It wasn't indeed.
The young man was determined to put you off, but he knew his Constitution.
The 14th Amendment, at any rate.
You quoted him chapter and verse. He had to admit that you were right.
He just couldn't think of a way to prove that I was wrong. I wasn't prepared for that.
What are you saying? Did you want him to reject us?
No, that was our strategy.
Whose strategy?
The NWSA, the National Women's Suffrage Association. At our meeting last January, we voted a resolution that we would attempt to qualify and vote in every election, according to opportunity. In doing so, we put upon the men, our brothers, the onus of refusing the votes of their fellow citizens and compel them to show just cause for such proceeding. That's what we said.
But if our brothers can't show just cause, what do we do?
Take them to court.
Which court?
The Supreme Court.
That's not easy to do.
But we have to try.
And what about on Tuesday? Do you think they're going to challenge us?
Oh, we certainly will be challenged. We certainly shall.
Who would challenge us?
Any of those people who were standing around today, I can't say I know who all of them were.
Well, there were the inspectors and the poll watchers, and then two others.
Wait, poll watchers. What are they?
They're the men that each party sends to the polling place to make sure the other party doesn't do something underhanded.
Something like.
Like buying votes, voting twice, stuffing extra ballots in the box. There are any number of tricks. My husband tells me about them all the time. He says the Democrats and Republicans are like cat and mouse. Each one watches the other constantly. It's American politics.
Excuse me, ladies.
What is it?
I have to be off.
Oh, so do I. What time is it?
8:15.
8:15. We were there for over an hour.
I couldn't save time.
I'm late for school. What am I going to tell them?
Tell them you are exercising your citizens' right.
What are you doing, Susan?
I'm gathering my materials. The 14th Amendment, Francis Minor's resolution, Senate Minority Report, Supreme Court decisions, Judge Riddle's speech. Oh, my head is spinning. I have 100 things to do. Mary Hebart, is your husband at the newspaper
He should be.
office? I'll ask him for an interview. Then I have to find an attorney
What do you need an attorney for?
to find out if what we did was legal.
How can it not be? They registered us.
Only because they couldn't think of a reason not to. I'm sure that at this very moment they are having second thoughts. It was a skirmish, that's all it was. The battle is yet to come.
Where do you expect to find an attorney? You can't just wander the streets.
I'll go to the Powers Building across from the courthouse. That's where most of them are. It's only a block from the newspaper office. I'll have plenty of time.
Well, have you made any appointments?
No.
You can't expect them to drop everything.
Yes, I can. This is important, Mary. When the founders wrote the Constitution, they left out half the citizenry. I intend to see that they put us back in.
Susan, did you ever wonder
Wonder what?
whether you're getting ahead of everyone?
No, I don't. Wondering is doubt. Doubt is debilitating, and I do not debilitate myself. I do have spells of hesitation, but they pass. I'll be home in time for dinner.
Good luck, Susan.
Good luck to us all.
To the Congress of the United States, protesting against an extension of suffrage to women, we, the undersigned, respectfully protest against an extension and the petition that represents the sober convictions of the majority of the women of the country. We are too painfully impressed by the grave perils in this proposed changes in our civil and political rights to remain silent. We beg that no law extending suffrage to women may be passed, as the passage of such a law would be fraught with danger so grave to the general order of the country.
Petition by 19 women to the U.S. Senate against women's suffrage. Washington, D.C., May 1871.
Lights down. Scene 4, 7. Zeldin's office about 10 a.m. At rise. Zeldin is sitting at his desk. Susan enters carrying a huge pile of books and papers.
Miss Anthony,
Judge Selden,
what brings you here this morning?
I don't have an appointment, I realize that, but it's very important.
No matter, I have some time. How may I help you?
I need your advice
What kind of advice?
about voting
Voting?
in the election Tuesday next.
But you can't vote.
I believe I can.
In the state of New York, women are excluded from voting, and in every other state for that matter.
But I've just registered.
Registered?
The powers that be added my name to the voter rolls of the 8th Ward, 1st District. Mine and 13 other women's.
How did you manage that?
One way and another.
8th Ward, 1st District. That's the newspaper shop on West Avenue.
The West End News Depot.
Were you challenged?
Yes.
Who challenged you?
One of the inspectors, Mr. Jones, a nice young man,
What did he say?
that the Constitution of the state of New York did not allow women to vote.
Quite right. What did you say?
I said I didn't base my claim on the Constitution of the state of New York, but on the Constitution of the United States, specifically the 14th Amendment. I asked if he was familiar with it, and he said he was. He'd read it several times. I argued my case for an hour or so, and he finally gave in.
For an hour.
Or so.
And he registered you.
He registered us.
Who was with you?
My sister Mary Hebard, the wife of Charles Hebard, editor of the Evening Express, and 11 other ladies.
14 in all.
That's right.
14th Amendment.
Privileges and immunities, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge.
I know it. Thank you.
Do you think that we should have approached it differently?
I'm not quite sure. I've only begun to think about it. Did you expect to be registered?
Not necessarily.
What would you have done if you'd been refused?
Gone to court?
But you weren't refused.
No. I was prepared for failure. Now I had to deal with success.
Besides the inspectors, who else was there?
2 supervisors. It wasn't clear to me what they were doing there, but they seemed to have some kind of authority.
The federal supervisor.
Why were they there?
Because of the Enforcement Act.
What is the Enforcement Act?
It's new law, fairly new. It was passed about 2 years ago. Its purpose is to ensure that the 15th Amendment is enforced.
The 15th Amendment that gave the vote to the emancipated slave?
That's it.
But what has it got to do with us?
The states, the southern states especially, have been finding ways to get around the 15th Amendment. The Enforcement Act was passed to make sure they don't. Hence, the supervisors.
But there are no emancipated slaves in Rochester.
And it doesn't matter. The Enforcement Act requires that federal supervisors be present at every polling place. They're also there to make sure that voters don't vote twice, don't sell their votes, and so on.
I only want to vote once.
What did the supervisors say when you were registered?
One of them said they had to register us. There was no way around it. The other one left the room.
Interesting.
As soon as we registered, word got around the neighborhood and half a dozen more women came down. Then word got around the city. I have heard that 50 women were registered in all.
50?
Or so,
So, you're asking my advice.
if you are prepared to give it.
I haven't studied the question.
Are you willing to?
I'll have to gather material.
I have everything here. 14th Amendment, Senator Butler's statement to the Judiciary Committee, the resolution of the Women's Suffrage Association, Senator Butler's minority report, Francis Minor's resolution, Judge Riddle's ruling in a similar case, and several Supreme Court decisions.
I see.
How soon can you get through them?
The election is on Tuesday. Come see me Monday afternoon. Let's say 2 o'clock.
Monday, 2 o'clock. Thank you, Judge Selden.
Not at all. May I ask you one thing?
Of course.
If I were to advise you not to vote, what would you do?
I would vote anyway.
I'll see you on Monday.
2 o'clock. Good day, Judge Selden.
Good day, Miss Anthony.
We can respect the enthusiasm of persons of not too practical intelligence who seek women's suffrage, but in politics, as they are in this present world, suffrage warns off virtuous women with a far-reaching stench. The unfitness of political activity to women is usually self-evident in the womanly mind. There is no more place for women in politics than in the police. What they have yet to consider is the terrible danger with which they are threatened in the proposition of a united political organization of the wickedness of both sexes. Here is the trouble for women's suffrage. For every bad man, we have a bad woman. And the worst of it is that the bad women are so much more unboundedly bad than their male peers. If the men cannot cope with their scoundrels, what could the women do with theirs?
William C. Conan, The Right Not to Vote, Scribner's Monthly, November 1871.
Lights down. Scene 5, setting. The living room of the Anthony home that same evening. At Rise, Mary and Susan are having tea.
So what did he say?
He said he would study the question.
About whether we should vote?
Attempt to vote.
He hadn't looked into it?
I'm sure he hadn't.
When is your appointment?
Monday afternoon,
Did you tell him you used the 14th Amendment?
immunities and privileges.
What did he say?
Said he would study it.
How much is he charging you to study it?
We didn't go into that.
It will cost you plenty.
I'm sure that it will. He used to be a judge. He was once lieutenant governor,
I didn't know
and
that.
only for one term. His health got bad, so we returned to private practice.
Susan, what about the 15th Amendment? Have you thought of that? The rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied on account of, what is it?
race, color, or previous condition of servitude.
If they give the franchise to the freed slaves, why not give it to others? Why not to us?
Yes, but how far do you go? Whom do you include? The Irish, the Chinese, the war veterans who don't have 2 dimes to rub together? Voting is power. People who don't have it don't hold on to it. They do their best to keep those who don't from getting it. Mrs. Stanton said it 20 years ago. This is this fortress of the stronghold, the one that women will find most difficult to take, the one that man will most reluctantly give up.
They could do it with one word.
Which word?
Sex. They could amend the 15th Amendment to say, the rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged on account of race, color, sex, or previous condition of servitude. That's all the law you need.
Amending an amendment. That would take work.
But why not? The Constitution's been patched and mended like a family quilt.
It isn't for us, Mary.
What isn't?
The 15th Amendment. It was meant for the slaves. We'd never been bought or sold or flocked to a pulp by an overseer. We can't imagine what their lives were like. The war to free them cost the country more than 500,000 dead. But 500,000 women give their lives for the right to vote? Would one? I can't imagine it. But it seemed like such an opportunity. We've been fighting battles state by state, endless skirmishes, tiny victories, and then all of a sudden 3 constitutional amendments, one after the other, freeing the slaves, defining the citizen, saying his privileges may not be abridged, and giving the vote to those who never had it. After so many years in the wilderness, it was such a flood of justice. Who could not want to take advantage of it? Reconstruction may be a godsend, maybe a disaster, I don't know what it will be, but whatever it is, it gives us an opportunity. Perhaps the only one we will ever have.
I know they don't come often. Abigail Adams asked her husband to remember the ladies. He didn't listen, and that was nearly a century ago.
I don't have another century to wait. People can look at a thing and look at it and refuse to see that it's wrong. To declare independence and say all men are created equal and yet deprive half of them of the means of government is tyranny. People walk the well-trodden path because it is there. They can see it, even if it leads nowhere. Why are women denied the vote? Because they're women, and women have never had the vote. Why haven't they? Because they're women. Should they? That requires thinking. People don't like to think, so they plod. They plod along a well-trodden path. I have no patience with plodding. I put my foot on ground that has never been trod, and I dare the others to come with me.
And some have.
Well, there should have been more.
Oh, you're not thinking about the newspaper.
Why did it go under? I still don't understand.
Well, it went under because it was awash in debt.
If only we could have stayed with it just a little longer.
Oh, you stayed with it for 4 years, you and Mrs. Stanton. That was more than enough. You might have chosen a less controversial title.
The revolution? What's controversial about that?
Susan,
You're right. You usually are.
Mary Hebard says that her husband says this election is going to be a mess. The Republicans, who are disgusted with Grant, have formed a new party, the Liberal Republicans. They've had their convention and they nominated Horace Greeley for president. Then the Democrats had their convention and they nominated Horace Greeley too. Republicans running against Republicans, Republicans nominating Democrats. Are you sure you want to get mixed up in this?
Are you saying that it's a dirty business and you should stay above it? That's what the antis said.
I'm only repeating what I hear. There are plenty of anti-suffragists around.
And I know their song. A woman's sphere is in the home. I say a woman's sphere is wherever she chooses to make it. And so what if it's a mess? In the history of the Republic, has there ever been a time when somebody wasn't saying politics was messy?
You're getting impatient, Susan.
I am. I am entitled to my impatience, Mary, and so are you. I never cease to be amazed what tolerance people can develop for the rut they happen to be in. This rut is not so bad, it's quite a pleasant rut. I have no use for that mentality. If it's a mess, we need to get into it, stir it up, and make it better if we can. We can hardly make it worse.
Hardly.
we've been polite. God knows we waited patiently, and now they tell us we need to wait some more. It's like pounding on a door that never gets open because nobody is listening. We've organized, we've reorganized, we've pleaded and petitioned until our voices are gone. The time for politeness is over.
There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. We must take the current when it serves or lose our ventures.
Shakespeare.
Julius Caesar. Brutus says it to Cassius in Act 4. Cassius wanted to wait for the enemy to come to him. Brutus wanted to meet the enemy head on. Every now and again, I attempt to get Shakespeare into the heads of ninth graders. Occasionally, I succeed.
Well, I feel like Sisyphus, pushing the rock up the hill. We testify, we present petitions, they lie in a stack, waiting to be read.
And the rock rolls down the hill.
Who would have imagined that women voting would be such a problem? We're ready, we're more than ready. We're readier than the ones whom the 15th Amendment protects.
Maybe that's the problem.
What is?
We're ready to use the vote. If they gave it to us, we would use it straight away. But nobody knows which way we would pull.
No. Some of us pull one way, some another, just like the men. That's what's happening in the territories.
Which territories?
Well, Wyoming, Utah. Women have the right to vote there. In Wyoming, they serve on juries, they're justices of the peace.
But what happens if the territories become states? Will the women be allowed to keep the vote?
I wish I knew. Utah has been petitioning for statehood since before the war.
Utah, a state.
It's possible. Keep an open mind.
Susan, I just thought of something.
What?
How do we vote?
What do you mean now?
If they let us, how do we go about doing it? I've never seen a ballot before, have you?
Not to use one, no.
How do you suppose it works?
I imagine there's a list of candidates and we select one.
But how? By checking a box?
Writing a name, however they do it.
In the town meetings in New England, I've heard they vote by voice. You have to say your vote out loud in front of everyone. I'm not sure I want to do that.
Why not? It's not supposed to be a secret.
What about the polling place?
What about it?
Well, it's a shop where they sell newspapers and ice cream and tobacco. Will people be standing around reading papers and spitting tobacco while we vote?
I don't know. All I want to do is vote. I don't care how. I don't care who's there. I don't care what they do so long as they let me vote.
You're meeting with Judge Selden.
This afternoon at 2 o'clock,
Will you ask him
ask him what.
how to vote?
I can't do that.
Why not?
He's an important man. His time is valuable.
Well, that doesn't mean he can't be asked. Is it important, Susan?
Of course it is.
Then why don't you ask?
I think I'm a ninny.
Why?
People are supposed to know these things.
But what if they don't? Because they've never been allowed.
You're right. I'll ask you.
Thank you.
The advocates of female suffrage claim that if women had the right to vote, they would purify legislation of many abuses. But we hold that the new status will prove to be the worst kind of communism. The relations between the sexes, now so carefully guarded by law and by society, will become common and therefore corrupt. The family, the foundation of the state, will disappear. The mothers, sisters, and daughters of our glorious past will exist no more. The female gender will vanish. We shall become a laughingstock to the nations of the world.
Madeline Vinton Dahlgren, thoughts on female suffrage and in vindication of women's true rights. Washington, D.C., 1871.
Lights down, scene 6, setting, Selden's office, Monday afternoon, 2 p.m. Advice, Selden is sitting at his desk, Susan enters.
Miss Anthony,
Good afternoon, Judge Selden. Have you had a busy weekend?
I have indeed.
Did you manage to get through everything? It was awful for me, I know.
No, not at all. I read everything. So did my brother Samuel. We talked it over a good deal. Tell me something. You said last Friday that when you went down to register, you didn't think it'd be allowed.
It was the last thing we expected.
And when you were challenged, you based your claim to vote on the 14th Amendment.
Well, I thought it was the best approach.
And so do I. Mind you, it isn't straightforward. The amendment makes women citizens, there's no doubt about that. It It says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States.
Privileges and or immunities.
Exactly. Your position is that privileges and immunities include the suffrage. Others insist they don't, as I'm sure you know.
I do.
There has to be a test. I don't see it any other way. The 3 amendments that have been ratified since the war, 13, 14, 15, are unprecedented. They overrule anything the states might do. In the past, it was the states that said who may and may not vote. They set the qualifications. But now what we're seeing is to prove that the 14th Amendment supersedes the Constitution of the state of New York, which clearly stipulates that only males may vote. The New York Constitution, the 14th Amendment. States' rights, the United States. One or the other, not both.
Then by all means, let's have a test.
But remember, your vote can be challenged. Anybody's can. There will be poll watchers, supervisors, inspectors. It's quite a cast of characters. It's even possible you could be charged.
With what?
A crime.
Surely it isn't a crime to vote.
It is if you vote illegally. I'm sure you've heard of voters who go from one polling place to another, voting as many times as they can, political parties paying them to do it.
I wouldn't do that.
No, of course you wouldn't. But voting is a messy business. There's a lot of fraud at the moment, but we're cracking down. I'll tell you this, if you're charged and brought to trial, I shall represent you in your defense. I would consider it a privilege.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Now, have you looked at the candidates?
A bit.
I can't say there's much that I like. I thought it was bad back in 1860. This time it may be worse. I assume you've heard about Credit Mobilier?
I read the article in the Tribune. 3 pages.
It doesn't seem to touch Grant himself, which is hard to believe, but his vice president, Colfax, was in on it. He's been sent packing. But now they say the new vice presidential candidate, Henry Wilson, was in on it too. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody goes to jail.
It's disgraceful.
And there's more to come. I'm sure there is the way Grant runs his administration. He doesn't understand politics or government. He's a military man. He gets rid of people who criticize him and replaces them with hangers-on. That can't be good. But I hear that he favors women's suffrage.
When I spoke with him at the White House, he said he had done more for women than any administration before him.
Really? How?
He's appointed 5,000 women postmasters.
Are 5,000 women postmasters who can't vote better off than 5,000 women who can?
When we have 5,000 women who can vote, I will be happy to tell you.
Touche. Did the Republicans include women's suffrage in their platform?
They talked a bit about how the contributions of women should be recognized, generalities. We've been hoping for a plank on the platform. We barely got a splinter.
So what's the alternative? Really?
I shall never vote for Horace Greeley.
Why not?
He repudiated women's suffrage, rejected it out of hand.
When did he do that?
At the State Constitutional Convention 2 years ago, he said that public sentiment would not sustain an innovation so revolutionary and sweeping that it would be at war with the venerable distribution of duties and functions between the sexes. Well, stupid, that's the point. The venerable distribution of duties between the sexes is precisely what we seek to overthrow. City's humbug.
Well, if you don't want 4 more years of Grant, what else is there? The Democrats have nominated Greeley. So have the liberal Republicans. A strange bedfellow.
After all the years he spent slinging arrows at the Democrats.
That was the old Democrats. States' rights, slavery, and all that. They've moved on. The war is over. Now the job is to get rid of Grant. Greeley is their man. So there you are. 4 more years of dubious dealings, 4 years of Horace Greeley.
Well, it doesn't make suffrage look terribly appealing at the moment.
Suffrage is politics. Politics is a cockfight. If you want to play, in for a penny, in for a pound,
I want to play.
then go and vote. Put your ballot in the box and deal with the consequences. And I wish you good luck.
Thank you. Oh, I almost forgot.
And what is it?
Talking with my sister about what would happen if you did advise us to vote, we both realized we don't know how.
How to...
Vote. How do we go about it? What do we do when we get there?
You step forward, you give your name, they check it against the registry, you get your tickets.
Tickets.
The list with the names of the candidates. Each party prints them up. I assume you'll be voting Republican.
Yes?
So you go to the Republican ticket man. He'll hand you your tickets, one for each ballot box.
How many ballot boxes are there?
Usually 5. Electoral, that's for the president and vice president. Then congressional district, congressional at large, state, and assembly.
So will the Republican ticket have all the names of the Republicans but none of the Democrats? Is that it?
And that's right. That's why they call it a party ticket.
But what if I wanted, just assuming, what if I wanted to vote for candidates from both parties?
You take the ticket of the party with the candidates you mostly prefer, then scratch out the names that you don't want, write in the names that you do. That's called splitting your ticket.
And where do these tickets go?
Into the ballot boxes.
One ticket for each box?
That's right.
5 boxes?
Yes.
Well, how will I know which ticket goes in which box?
They'll be marked. If there's any doubt, the inspector will help you.
How will I know who is the inspector?
He'll identify himself.
I see. Thank you.
You'll be all right.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing how you fare. How many of you will there be?
Well, myself and my sister, Mary Hebard, and as many others as I can catch in the net.
I wish you well. Good day.
Thank you, Judge Selby. Good day.
Citizenship no more carries the right to vote than it carries the power to fly to the moon. If these women in the 8th Ward offer to vote, they should be challenged. And if they take the oaths and deposit their ballots, they should all be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Editorial, Rochester Union and Advertiser, November 2nd, 1872.
Lights down, scene 7, setting, the West End News Disco. 7 a.m., the desk and the 3 chairs. At rise, Jones enters, crosses down to the downstage and speaks to an unseen group of voters.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, the poll of this election is opened, and all persons attending the same are strictly charged and commanded by the authority and in the name of the people of the state to keep the peace thereof during their attendance at this election upon pain of imprisonment, and all persons are desired to take notice that the poll will be closed at 4:00 p.m. of this day, and in the meantime will remain open without intermission. Voters are now at liberty to present themselves. Next voter. Name.
Susan B. Anthony.
Challenge!
The voter has been challenged. In accordance with the Election Code of the State of New York, Section 218, I am required to tender the preliminary oath. Madam, are you willing to take the oath?
I am.
Place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear that you will fully and truly answer all such questions as shall be put to you, touching your place of residence and qualifications as an elector?
I do.
What is your name?
Susan B. Anthony,
Where do you now reside?
7 Madison Street, Rochester, New York,
Are you a native or naturalized citizen?
native,
Where were you born?
Adams, Massachusetts,
How many years have you resided in the United States?
52 years,
How long have you resided in this election district?
8 years,
What was the last place of your residence before you came into this election district?
Gates, New York,
How long do you contemplate residing in this election district?
permanently.
The voter has taken the preliminary oath as required by law. Is the challenge withdrawn?
No!
The challenge is not withdrawn. In accordance with the Election Code of the State of New York, Section 222, I am now required to administer the general oath. Madam, are you willing to take the oath?
I am.
Place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear that you have been a citizen of the United States for 10 days and are now of the age of 21 years, that you have been an inhabitant of this state for 1 year next preceding this election, and for the last 4 months a resident of this county, that you have been for 30 days next preceding this election a resident of the 8th Ward, 1st District, that you are now a resident of the city of Rochester and of the 8th Ward, 1st District, in which you now offer to vote, that you have not received, or expected to receive, or paid, or contributed, or promised to pay or contribute money for your vote, or withholding your vote, that you have not made any bet or wager and are not directly or indirectly interested in any bet or wager depending on the results of this election, and that you have not voted at this election.
I do.
Your ballots are accepted. You may place them in the boxes.
Objection! The voter has been challenged. The challenge has not been withdrawn.
The challenge is noted. However, by law, a ballot may be rejected only if the voter refuses to take either the preliminary or the general oath. The voter has taken both. Therefore, her ballots are accepted. Next voter.
Say what you will, the whole question of women's status in the state and in society is full of contradictions. We are so responsible, yet irresponsible. We are idols. We are idiots. We are everything. We are nothing. We may plot against a government and hang for it, but if we help to found and sustain a government by toil and hardship, courage, loyalty, and faith, by the sacrifice of those nearest and dearest to us, and then venture to clutch at the crumbs that fall from the table where our masters feast, you arrest us, imprison us, try us, fine us, and then add injury to insult by calling us old, ugly, and fanatical.
Sarah Jane Lippincott. Writing is Grace Greenwood on women's suffrage. The Women's Journal, August 23rd, 1873.
It's down, scene 8, setting, the parlor of the Anthony home about 7:45 a.m. At Rise, Susan Mary and Mary Hebert.
We have done it!
We have!
How would you believe it, Mary Hebard? Did you think that we would ever see this day?
I had my doubts.
Well, doubt no more. The women of Rochester have cast their vote.
We have. We need to celebrate.
What do we have to celebrate with?
Anything.
It should be something special. I wonder if I still have that sherry.
Sherry in the morning? On a school day?
I almost forgot. I have just enough time to get there for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll celebrate tonight.
Oh, we shall.
Goodbye, Mary. Goodbye, Susan.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Ah, I thought it was over. I really did. When they challenged us, I thought we were done for.
The young inspector knew his business.
We did. There was a procedure, we just didn't know what it was. We certainly do now. What's the matter, Mary Hebard?
It can't be this simple.
I wouldn't call it simple. I don't like being challenged. I don't like it at all.
But it was a ritual, wasn't it? We stepped forward, we gave our names, we were challenged, we took an oath. The challenger refused to yield, we took another oath. Our votes were accepted. Our tickets went into the boxes and we walked out.
The hardest part was figuring out which ticket went into which box. How many were there?
6.
I thought there would be 5.
There was a constitutional amendment issued that we didn't vote. We did all the rest, electoral, congressional district, congressional at large, state, and assembly.
Why don't they just put everything on one ballot?
It's a Byzantine system, but Charles says that the parties say they want it that way. It helps them keep their people in line. Did you notice that each party's ticket were printed on a piece of paper of a different color?
I didn't.
They were. That way the poll watchers can tell at a glance whether you're one of theirs or the others.
Unless you split your ticket.
That's not easy to do. Did you notice how little space there was in between the name of the candidates?
I did notice that.
On purpose, so to make it difficult to write in another name.
But there must be some way to do it.
There is. Did you notice the pots of paste and scissors on the table?
What were they for?
So that you could cut a name out of one ticket and place it onto another.
It's a lot of work.
It is. Quite a little system we've cut.
Well, whatever it is, we have voted. This is an historic day, Mary Hebard. Abigail Adams would be proud, don't you agree?
There must be something else.
What?
I couldn't say. Maybe I listen to my husband too much.
Maybe you do. I have letters to write.
Give my greetings to Mrs. Stanton.
I shall.
Goodbye, Susan, and thank you.
Thank you, Mary Hebard. Goodbye. Rochester, New York, November 5th, 1872. Dear Mrs. Stanton.
We acknowledge no inferiority to men. We claim to have no less ability to perform the duties which God has imposed upon us than they have to perform those imposed upon them. Our fathers, brothers, husbands, and sons represent us in the cornfield, the battlefield, and at the ballot box. And we represent them in the schoolroom, at the fireside, and at the cradle, believing our representation to be thus more full and impartial than it could possibly be were all women allowed to vote. We do therefore respectfully protest against any legislation to establish women's suffrage in our land or in any part of it.
Protest signed by ladies of Lorain County, Ohio, presented to the Ohio State Legislature, March 14th, 1870.
Lights down, scene 9, setting, the parlor of the Anthony house. At Rise, Mary is at the window. Susan enters.
Susan, there's someone coming up the walk.
Who is it?
A man. He looks official. Is he familiar?
Let's see. I don't recognize
I
him.
wonder what he wants.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Elijah Keeney, Deputy U.S. Marshal.
Good afternoon, Mr. Keeney. What can we do for you?
I'm here to see Miss Susan B. Anthony.
I am she, Mr. Keeney. What is the nature of your business?
I am here to place you under arrest.
Arrest?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that would suggest that I have broken the law.
You have.
May I ask which law?
I have the warrant here.
Complaint this day has been made by an oath before me, William C. Storr, Commissioner, charging that Susan B. Anthony, on or about the 5th day of November 1872 in the city of Rochester, New York, at an election held in the 8th Ward of the city of Rochester, did then and there vote for a representative in the Congress of the United States without having a lawful right to vote in violation of Section 19 of an Act of Congress approved May 31st, 1870, entitled An Act to Enforce the Right of Citizens of the United States to vote in the several states of the Union and for other purposes. Mr. Keeney, what does this mean? What is this Act of Congress approved May 31st?
It's called the Enforcement Act. It's a new law, fairly new.
Yes, I've heard of it, but how am I supposed to have broken it?
Not all of it, ma'am, just Section 19.
What is Section 19?
The marshal said he would probably ask that, so I brought a copy of it with me.
And be it further enacted that if any election for representative or delegate in the Congress of the United States, any person shall knowingly vote or attempt to vote in the name of any other person, whether living or dead or fictive. Where's the part that has to do with me?
Right here, ma'am. Or vote without having.
Without having a lawful right to vote. Every such person shall be deemed guilty of a crime, and for such crime be liable to prosecution in any court of competent jurisdiction, and on conviction thereof shall be punished by a fine not exceeding $500, by imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years, or both. 3 years, $500.
Or both.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Keeney. What happens next?
Well, ma'am, if you'll come with me, I am required to take you downtown to the commissioner's office.
The Commissioner.
Yes, ma'am.
What will happen there?
There will be a hearing. You'll be charged. You plead guilty or not. And they'll schedule your trial.
Whom will I be tried by?
It will be a jury trial in the district court.
After I'm charged, will I be allowed to come home?
That depends whether the commissioner orders bail.
And if I cannot post bail?
I'll have to take you to the county jail.
I see. I'm being arrested, Mary.
Oh, Susan!
Do you have handcuffs, Mr. Keeney?
I do.
Aren't you going to put them on me?
I beg your pardon?
Handcuffs. Don't I deserve a proper arrest?
I don't think that will be necessary.
No handcuffs?
No.
Well, then we will have to make do. How do you propose to convey me to the Commissioner's office?
I came here on the trolley. I suggest we go that way.
Will I have to pay for the trolley?
No, ma'am, I'll pay for both of us.
How much is it?
A dime.
I believe that's the first dime I've ever gotten from Uncle Sam in my life. Mary, don't wait dinner for me. Mr. Keeney, shall we go?
After you, ma'am.
The exit lights down in the back one. Act 2, Scene 1. Rise, stage 2.
Good and lawful men of the district do, upon their oaths, present that Susan B. Anthony of Rochester, in the county of Monroe, with force and arms, at and in the first election district of the 8th Ward of the city of Rochester, in the county of Monroe, in said northern district of New York, heretofore, to wit, when the 5th day of November in the year of our Lord 1872, did knowingly, wrongfully, and unlawfully vote for a representative in the Congress of the United States for the state of New York, without having a lawful right to vote. The said Susan B. Anthony being then and there a person of the female sex, as she, the said Susan B. Anthony, then and there well knew, contrary to the statutes of the United States of America and against the peace of the United States of America and their dignity.
Lights up, standing Selden's office, and rise. Selden and Susan are conferring about the upcoming trial.
You know the whole story.
I know most of it,
You were there. You argued my case at the arraignment. You paid my bail.
only because you refused to.
You shouldn't have done that.
I couldn't let you go to jail.
I was willing to go.
I know you were.
If I had been in jail, I could have gotten, what do you call it?
A writ of habeas corpus.
That's it.
Not necessarily.
But I could have heard my case heard by the Supreme Court.
Even with a writ of habeas corpus, the chances of a case going to the Supreme Court are infinitesimal.
Be that as it may, I would have had a better chance in jail.
You were in custody.
Custody isn't jail.
Not the way you've been treating it. Marshal Keeney told me you went to Washington. He was very unhappy.
It was the Suffrage Association meeting. I had to attend. I am the president.
Then you went on a speaking tour around the county, 21 cities.
I had to argue my case.
To whom?
To everyone.
Could we please?
Of course.
I would like to review what happened at the polling place.
Certainly.
You said you were challenged.
We were all challenged.
I want to focus on your case specifically.
But all of us voted.
You did, but so far as we know, you're the only one who's going to trial.
I still don't know who challenged us.
Lewis, Sylvester Lewis,
Who is he?
the Democrats' poll watcher.
Probably the one who was spitting tobacco. I hate tobacco spitters.
So you were challenged. What happened next?
When the young inspector, Mr. Jones, asked me if I was willing to swear an oath.
The preliminary oath.
That's it.
And what was in the oath?
My name, my address, how long I had lived in the voting district.
Good. After you took the preliminary oath, was the challenge withdrawn?
No. Mr. Jones asked the challenger if he was willing to abandon his challenge. He wasn't, so Mr. Jones had me swear another oath.
And the general oath.
He asked me to swear that I hadn't bet on the election. I'd never bet on anything in my life.
So you took both of the oaths,
I did.
and the inspector accepted your vote.
He had to. That's what everyone seemed to be saying. He told the challenger there was no way around it.
And in the oaths, was there anything about your being a woman?
Nothing at all. I could have been a giraffe.
You placed your tickets in the boxes.
5 of them, yeah.
And how many women were with you?
Myself, my sister Mary, Mary Hebard, and 11 others.
So 14 in all.
That's right. So where do we stand?
You did everything you were supposed to. So did the inspector. The only way it could have gone wrong is if you had taken the oaths knowing that you were not a qualified voter.
What would happen then?
You would have been charged with perjury. Did you have any doubt that you were a qualified voter?
Not a particle.
So, there we are. Now it's up to the court, and the jury, of course. It will be a jury trial. You have technically committed a felony, punishable by...
3 years imprisonment, $500 fine, or both, and the cost of the prosecution. I know.
It's ironic.
What is?
You told me at our first meeting that you expected to be rejected at the registry, then go to court, presumably as a plaintiff. Instead, they accepted your registration and allowed you to vote. Now you're going to court as a defendant.
Tables turned.
Indeed they are. There's nothing more jealously guarded than the privilege of voting.
Guarded by the powers that be.
Don't you aspire to be them someday?
What?
The powers that be,
I just want to be a real citizen.
of course. And you shall have your day in court. I would have preferred to represent you as a plaintiff, but nevertheless I shall argue your case. It's going to take some imagination.
From me.
Oh no. You have already provided all the imagination we need. I meant from the court. The prosecutor has done an interesting thing.
And what is that?
He requested a change of venue. Ordinarily, the trial will be held in the district court here in Rochester. But after all your speechifying to the potential jurors in the 21 cities, he's requested that the trial be moved to the circuit court in Canandaigua. It's only 35 miles away, but it changes the game.
How does it do that?
The case will now be tried before an associate justice, Justice Hunt.
Associate Justice of the Supreme Court?
That's right. The court sits from December through April. The rest of the year, the justices preside in circuit courts. Justice Hunt should be in Canandaigua by about mid-June. That's what you wanted, isn't it? If you can't go to the Supreme Court, the court will come to you.
It is not the same thing.
It isn't, but we'll take what we can get. A Supreme Court justice's verdict will have more weight than a district judge's. The disadvantage, of course, is that the venue is neutral territory. Juries won't know who you are or what you're about. And Justice Hunt is not famous for his imagination. is one of those judges who interprets the Constitution strictly as it was written, what the founders intended, nothing more and nothing less.
As if history came to a stop with the founders.
Exactly. They were visionary people, some of them, but they couldn't see everything. But now, by using the 14th Amendment, you have challenged the legal system to concede that the franchise, the right to vote, is the inherent privilege of every American citizen.
Which is what I said when I registered.
If the court agrees with you, you'll be a hero.
And if it doesn't, I'll be a convicted criminal.
In for a penny, in for a pound. We have work to do.
What do you need from me?
At the moment, nothing. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Tell me something.
What?
Are you glad that you did it?
It isn't a question of being glad, Judge Sullivan. It had to be done. It was wrong at the beginning. The founders wrote a constitution that left out half the citizenry. It was hopelessly wrong, and it's never been put right since. It's like sailing a ship with a crack down below the waterline. Nobody sees the crack because nobody bothers to look down there. But if somebody doesn't do something, eventually that ship will sink. I don't want the ship to sink.
Neither do I. Good day, Miss.
Good day.
Miss Susan B. Anthony goes to trial week after next in the indictment against her for illegal voting. But sensible people cannot regard her as a martyr to anything but her own fanaticism. In these days, a few people really believe that suffrage is the, quote, natural right of any citizen. No one is entitled to the ballot except as it is best for society that he or she should have it. And who is Miss Anthony that she should insist on taking what she claims as her rights while, in the very act, she tramples down what 9/10 of the people believe on their rights? To try to get political rights in Miss Anthony's guerrilla way is to put the knife to the throat of law and order and introduce anarchy at once.
Editorial, The Advance, Chicago, Illinois, January 9th, 1873.
Scene 2, setting, Circuit Court, Canandaigua, New York. Advised, the stage is dark and bare.
Oyez, 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 all persons having business before the Honorable, the Circuit Court of Northern District of New York are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court, the Honorable Chief Justice Ward Hunt presiding.
Lights up, the stage participants enter. Richard Crown, District Attorney stands.
May it please the court and gentlemen of the jury. On the 5th of November, 1872, the defendant, Miss Susan B. Anthony, voted for a representative in the Congress of the United States to represent the 29th Congressional District of this state, and also for a representative at large to represent the state of New York in the Congress of the United States. At that time, she was a woman. I suppose there will be no question about that. The question in this case will rather be a question of law than one of fact. When all of the evidence is out, it will be for you to decide, under the charge of His Honor the Judge, whether or not the defendant committed the offense of voting for a representative in Congress upon that occasion. We think, on the part of the government, that there is no question about it. Whatever Miss Anthony's intentions may have been, whether they were good or otherwise, she did not have a right to vote. And if she did vote without having a lawful right to vote, then there is no question but what she is guilty of violating a law of the United States. It is not necessary for me to state all the facts which will be proven on the part of the government. I shall leave that to be shown by the evidence and by the witnesses. If any question of law shall arise, His Honor will undoubtedly give you instructions as he shall deem proper.
You may call your first witness.
The United States call Mr. Beverly Jones.
Beverly Jones,
Do you swear that the evidence which you shall give relating to the matters and difference between the United States plaintiff and Susan B. Anthony defendant shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do.
Mr. Jones, where do you reside?
8th Ward, Rochester.
Where were you living on the 5th of November, 1872?
Same place.
In what capacity were you acting upon that day?
Inspector of Election.
Do you know the defendant, Miss Susan B. Anthony?
Yes, sir.
Upon the 5th day of November, did the defendant, Susan B. Anthony, vote in the 8th Ward of the City of Rochester?
Yes, sir.
Did you see her vote?
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
Prior to the election, was there a registry of voters in that district made?
Yes, sir.
Were you one of the officers engaged in making that registry?
Yes, sir.
When the registry was being made, did Miss Anthony appear before the Board of Registry and claim to be registered as a voter?
She did.
Was there any objection made or any doubt raised as to her right to vote?
There was.
On what ground?
On the ground that the Constitution of the State of New York did not allow women to vote.
What would you state what occurred there?
Miss Anthony and two other ladies came into the room. Miss Anthony asked if this was the place where they registered the names of voters. I told her it was. She said she would like to have her name registered. I told her I didn't think we could register her name. It was contrary to the Constitution of the State of New York. She said she didn't claim any rights under the Constitution of the State of New York. She claimed her rights under the Constitution of the United States, under an amendment to the Constitution. She asked me if I was conversant with the 14th Amendment. I told her I had read it and heard of it several times.
What was the defect in her right to vote as a citizen?
She was not a male citizen.
That she was a woman.
Yes, sir.
Did the board consider the question of her right to registry and decide that she was entitled to registry as a voter?
Yes, sir.
And she was registered accordingly?
Yes, sir.
At the time of the registry, was the supervisor of election present at the board?
Yes, sir. There was a United States Supervisor of Elections, two of them. Daniel J. Warner, the United States Supervisor, Silas J. Wagner, another United States Supervisor, and a United States Marshal.
Did they advise the registry or did they not?
One of them said that there was no way to get around placing the name upon the register. The other one, when she came in, left the room.
Were you present on the day of election?
Yes, sir.
When she offered her vote, was question made of her right to vote as a woman?
She was challenged.
Go on.
I told Miss Anthony if she insisted upon voting, she would have to swear her ballot in. She said she insisted upon voting, and I presented her the Bible and administered to her the preliminary oath which she took. I turned to the gentleman that challenged her and asked him if he still insisted on his challenge. He said he did. I told her she would have to take the general oath. I administered the general oath, and she took it.
Was that done in each case of the women who voted?
It was.
In receiving those ballots, did you act honestly in accordance with your sense of duty and in accordance with your best judgment?
I did.
I have no further questions.
The witness may step down.
I propose to call Miss Anthony as to the fact of her voting on the question of the intention or belief under which she voted.
Objection. She is not competent as a witness in her behalf.
Sustained.
The defendant is indicted under the 19th section of the Act of Congress, May 31st, 1870, for voting without having a lawful right to vote. The only alleged ground of illegality of the defendant's vote is that she is a woman. If the same act had been done by her brother under the same circumstances, the act would have been considered honorable and laudable. But having been done by a woman, it is said to be a crime. The crime consists not in the act done, but in the fact that the person doing it was a woman and not a man. I believe that this is the first instance in which a woman has been arraigned in a criminal court merely on account of her sex. No greater absurdity could be presented than that of rewarding men and punishing women for the same act. Before the last election, Miss Anthony called upon me for advice upon the question whether she was or was not a legal voter. I examined the question and gave her my opinion unhesitatingly that the laws and constitutions of the United States authorized her to vote, as well as they authorized any man to vote. And I advised her to have her name placed upon the registry and to vote at the election if the inspector should receive her vote. I gave that advice in good faith, believing it to be accurate, and I believe it to be accurate still. Women have the same interest that men have in the establishment and maintenance of good government. They are bound to obey the laws to the same extent as men. They suffer to the same extent by bad laws and profit to the same extent by good law. Upon principles of equal justice, They should be allowed to express their preference in the choice of lawmakers and rulers equally with men. A person deprived of political rights is essentially a slave, because he holds his personal rights subject to the wills of those who possess the political power. The principle constitutes the very cornerstone of our government, indeed of all Republican government. If there is any privilege of the citizen which is paramount to all others, it is the right of suffrage. I submit to your honor that Miss Anthony had a lawful right to vote. The 14th Amendment secured that right and did not need the aid of any further legislation. She stands arraigned as a criminal for taking the only steps by which it was possible to bring the greater constitutional question before the tribunals of the country. If she is to be condemned as a criminal, her condemnation would only show that women need the ballot for their own protection. Thanking your honor for the great patience with which you have listened to my remarks, I submit the legal questions which the case involves for your honor's consideration. The defense rests.
The only question in the case is, had the defendant, being a female, the right to vote? She bases her right to vote on the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. That amendment reads as follows. Amendment 14, Section 1. Quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. End quote. The framers of the amendment did not mean that this language gives the right to vote to all citizens. If so, then there is no limitation as to sex or age or disqualification on account of conviction of crime or unsoundness of mind. For persons of unsound mind, criminals, and persons under 21 years of age, if born or naturalized in the United States, are citizens. We submit that the right to vote without restriction is not included in the words privileges or immunities. These words have a well-defined meaning. As used in the 14th Amendment, they are confined to those privileges and immunities which are fundamental or natural. Protection by the government, the enjoyment of life and liberty, the right to acquire and possess property, to pursue and obtain happiness and safety, to which may be added the elective franchise as regulated and established by the laws or constitution of the state in which it is to be exercised. The people, in their sovereignty, have the right to prescribe qualifications for electors and the elected. They have done this in the Constitution of the State of New York, where we find the qualifications of persons who may vote. Quote, every male citizen of the age of 21 years who shall have been a citizen for 10 days and an inhabitant of this state 1 year next preceding any election, and for the last 4 months a resident of the county where he may offer his vote, shall be entitled to vote at such election in the election district of which he shall be at the time a resident and not elsewhere. End quote. These provisions are not changed by the 14th and 15th Amendments. Under the Constitution of the State of New York, the defendant clearly had no right to vote. It may possibly be claimed that there was no intent to violate the law. We think that this is not a question to be considered in this case. Upon examination before the U.S. Commissioner, she offered herself as a witness and testified in her own behalf. She testified as follows.
Are you the person spoken of as defendant?
Yes, sir.
Previous to voting at the 1st District poll in the 8th Ward, did you take the advice of counsel upon voting?
Yes, sir.
Who was it you talked with?
Judge Henry R. Selden.
What did he advise you with reference to your legal right to vote?
He said it was the only way to find out what the law was upon the subject, to bring it to a test.
Did he advise you to go and offer your vote?
Yes, sir.
State whether or not prior to such advice you had retained Mr. Selden to defend you in this action.
No, sir. I first went to Judge Selden to sound him if we should want him.
Were you not influenced by his advice in the matter at all?
No, sir.
Did you have any doubt yourself of your right to vote?
Not a particle.
Would you not have made the same efforts to vote that you did if you had not consulted with Judge Selden?
Yes, sir.
You went into the matter for the purpose of testing the question?
Yes, sir. I had been resolved to vote for 3 years.
This evidence does not show that she sought the advice of counsel in good faith, nor does the evidence disclose that she fully and fairly stated her case to the Board of Registers and the Election Board. She would have attempted to vote whatever the decision might have been. Your Honor, the prosecution rests.
Gentlemen of the jury, the defendant is indicted under the Act of Congress of 1870 for having voted for representatives in Congress in November 1872. That act makes it an offense for any person knowingly to vote for such representatives without having a right to vote. The defendant insists that she has a right to vote, that the provision of the Constitution of this state limiting the right to vote to persons of the male sex is in violation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States and is void. The 14th Amendment provides that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of a citizen of the United States. This clause is intended to be a protection, not to all our rights, but only to our rights as citizens of the United States. The words citizen of a state are carefully omitted. The privilege of voting is a privilege arising under the state, not the United States. The qualifications are different in the different states. If the state of New York should provide that no person should vote until he had reached the age of 31, or after the age of 50, or that no person having gray hair should be entitled to vote, we might say that such regulations were unjust, tyrannical. But I do not see how it could be a violation of any right under the Constitution. The 14th Amendment gives no right to a woman to vote. Miss Anthony knew that she was a woman, and that the Constitution of this state prohibits her from voting. She intended to violate that provision, intended to test it perhaps, but certainly to violate it. She undertook to settle a principle in her own person. She takes the risk and she cannot escape the consequences. She voluntarily gave a vote which was illegal and thus is subject to the penalty of the law. I therefore direct that you find a verdict of guilty.
That is a direction no court has power to make in a criminal case.
Take the verdict, Mr. Clerk. Gentlemen of the jury, hearken to your verdict as the court has reported it. You say you find the defendant guilty of the offense whereof she stands indicted, and so say you all?
I don't know whether an exception is available, but I certainly must accept to the direction of the court that the jury should find a verdict of guilty. I claim that is a power not given to any court in a criminal case. Will the clerk poll the jury?
No. Gentlemen of the jury, you are discharged. Has the prisoner anything to say why sentence shall not be pronounced?
Yes, Your Honor. I have many things to say. For in your ordered verdict of guilty, you have trampled underfoot every vital principle of our government. My natural rights, my civil rights, my political rights, my judicial rights are all alike ignored. I am degraded from the status of a citizen to that of a subject. And not only myself individually, but all of my sex are, by your Honor's verdict, doomed to political subjugation under this so-called form of government.
The court cannot listen to a rehearsal of arguments the prisoner's counsel has already consumed 3 hours in presenting.
May it please, Your Honor, I am not arguing the question, but simply stating the reasons why sentence cannot, in justice, be pronounced against me. Your denial of my citizens' right to vote is the denial of my right to consent as one of the governed, the denial of my right of representation as one of the taxed, the denial of my right to a trial by a jury of my peers as an offender under the law, therefore the denial of my sacred rights to life, liberty, property.
The court cannot allow the prisoner to go on.
But your honor will not deny me this one and only poor privilege of protest against this high-handed outrage upon my citizens' rights. May it please the court to remember that since the day of my arrest last November, this is the first time that either myself or any person of my disfranchised class has been allowed a word of defense before judge or jury.
The prisoner must sit down. The court cannot allow.
All of my prosecutors, from the 8th Ward corner grocery politician who entered the complaint, to the United States Marshal, Commissioner, a district attorney, district judge, your honor on the bench, not one is my peer, but each and all are my political sovereigns. And had your honor submitted my case to the jury, as was clearly your duty, even then I should have had just cause of protest. For not one of those men was my peer, but native or foreign-born, white or black, rich or poor, educated or ignorant, awake or asleep, sober or drunk, each and every man of them was my political superior. Even my counsel, Honorable Henry R. Selden, who has argued my case so ably, is my political sovereign. All, judge, jury, counsel, must be of the superior class.
The court must insist. This prisoner has been tried according to the established forms of law.
Yes, your honor, but by a form of law all made by men, interpreted by men, administered by men, in favor of men and against women. And hence, your honor's ordered verdict of guilty against a United States citizen for the exercise of that citizen's right to vote, simply because that citizen was a woman and not a
The
man.
court orders the prisoner to sit down. It will not allow another word.
When I was brought before your honor for trial, I hoped for a broad and liberal interpretation of the Constitution and its recent amendments that should declare equality of rights to all persons born or naturalized in the United States. But failing to get this justice, failing even to get a trial by a jury, I ask not leniency at your hands, but rather the full rigors of the law.
The sentence of the court is that you pay a fine of $100 and the costs of the prosecution.
May it please your honor, I shall never pay $1 of your unjust penalty.
Madam, the court will not order you committed until the fine is paid. This court is adjourned.
Lights down, lights up.
American womanhood has never skulked behind a mask in a harem or burned on the funeral pyre, yet she is still bound by law in the swaddling bands of an old barbarism. Though the world has been steadily recognizing the rights of new classes, yet we stand today talking of precedents, authorities, laws, and constitutions, as if each generation were not better able to judge of its wants than the one that preceded it. If we are to be governed in all things by the men of the 18th century, and the 20th by the 19th, and so on, the world will be always governed by dead men.
This is Isabella Beecher Hooker, testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Washington, D.C., January 12, 1872.
Lights down. Scene 3, setting. Selden's office a few days later. Rise. Selden is seated at his desk. Susan is seated in the chair.
He said he wouldn't order me committed until the fine is paid.
That's right.
How could he do that? The sentence was a $100 fine, not jail.
It was.
So how could he order me committed?
You were in contempt of court.
He didn't say that.
Oh, believe me, you were.
And he could put me in jail for that.
He can,
But he won't.
not until you pay the fine.
Which I've refused to do.
So you won't go to jail, which is what he wanted. He knew that, so he made sure you wouldn't get it. Actually, he didn't need to.
Why not?
Confinement for contempt of court doesn't entail habeas corpus. You couldn't have appealed to the Supreme Court in any case.
So what do we do now?
In the courts, I'm afraid there's nothing else. You've tested the law. The court has responded in the same unimaginative way it has for years. What does the text say? What did the founders intend? We tried to make the system take a step forward, an imaginative leap, if you will, but it refused. We are essentially back to where we began.
And the rock rolls down the hill.
I beg your pardon?
It was injustice, pure and simple.
No, it was justice, just not the kind you were looking for. Justice Hunt wrote the law as he saw it in his own dim way.
He had his word ready before he heard the closing arguments. He probably wrote it out ahead of time.
He probably did. We tried to stretch the 14th Amendment to make it fit your specific situation. It didn't work. It's like knitting a sock that isn't big enough to fit the foot it's intended for. Justice Hunt ruled that our sock was too small.
Justice Hunt obviously never knitted a sock.
Nor have I. But my wife, who has knitted many, says you can never be sure, while you're knitting it, whether it's going to fit. You can't be sure until you try it all.
I should have gone to jail.
There is a chance that a woman's suffrage case may get to the Supreme Court.
Virginia Minor.
That's right.
She tried to register in St. Louis about 2 weeks before I did here. They turned her down.
Which made her a plaintiff. And her husband is an attorney, which helped. The Missouri Supreme Court ruled against them in May and filed an appeal. If the Supreme Court takes the case, it should be argued sometime next year. But there's no guarantee. Even if they do get there, they may well encounter eighth mentalities just like Justice Hunt's.
But at least they will have had the chance.
They will, but your bit is over. You fought the good fight, you've run the race. I would advise you to put all of this behind you and resume your life.
But this is my life. Until women have the suffrage, there's nothing else for me.
If anything turns up, I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Oh, I almost forgot. Your fee,
What fee?
for your time, for everything you've done.
There is no fee.
That's impossible.
Believe me, Miss Anthony, had you been one of my regular clients, I would be handing you a substantial bill. But I have admired your efforts for many years. I've admired you. I consider it a privilege to be able to help. I often wonder if I had pursued a single purpose the same way you have yours, how much I might have achieved. Goodbye. Good luck.
Thank you, Judge Sullivan.
Not at all.
The fact that a large majority of women manifest so little interest in the question of suffrage is evidence of the absence of any very extended dissatisfaction with their present position. Female suffragists find their most formidable opponents among their own sex. Is not the inclination of this class as worthy of consideration as the opinions of those who maintain the opposite view? Are they any less sincere? Should they be deemed liberal, apathetic, pusillanimous, or imbecile because they failed to discover in the ballot the glories of a redeemed womanhood?
Mrs. Sarah B. Cooper, Woman Suffrage, Cui Bono, Overland Monthly and Out West Magazine, February 1872.
Lights down, scene 4, setting, the front parlor of Susanette of the Anthony home. And rise. Mary, Susan, and Petey are on stage, Act 1, Scene 9,
Mr. Keeney, what measures?
If you can't pay the fine, ma'am, I'm required to make an inventory of your goods
For what purpose?
to determine if they have sufficient value to be sold at auction to pay the fine.
The court would do that.
It would order that it be done.
What kind of goods?
But this house, furniture,
The house belongs to my mother, and so does most of the furniture. The rest is my sister's. My sister wasn't convicted.
she wasn't.
And what is there left to inventory?
Chattels.
Chattels? What are they?
I had to look that one up. Chattels are any movable property, not the house or the land, but anything that a buyer, the highest bidder that is, could cart away. Do you have chattels, ma'am?
I suppose I have. What would you need to see?
Anything in the house that belongs specifically to you that somebody could take away?
I have things in my study, in my bedroom,
If you wouldn't mind showing me.
if we must. Would you excuse us?
Of course. I knew it would come to this. She can't pay the fine. She's still $10,000 in debt from that newspaper. A lot of it she owes to me.
10,000?
This happened to my parents during the Panic of '37. Our father owned 2 textile mills. Both of them went bankrupt. We couldn't pay the creditors, so everything we had was put up for auction. Our house, a beautiful house, 15 rooms, room enough for everyone, and all our personal goods. I can still remember the auctioneers drawing up the inventory. My mother and father's spectacles, the women's underclothing, my mother's, my sister's, mine. Nothing was overlooked. It all went up on the auction block just about this time of year, 35 years ago. I was only 8. I don't remember much, but Susan was 7 years older. I'm sure she remembers it all.
Did you lose everything?
The house, there was no way to save that. But our personal things were rescued by our uncle, our mother's brother, Joshua. He went to the auction, he put in the highest bid, and he brought it all back but the house. If it hadn't been for him, we would have lost everything.
She must feel terrible.
Well, now she'll be asking for money again, and I'll lend it to her because I always do. If only she would stop and think about the debris she leaves in her wake.
She never does anything by half, does she?
Not if she can help it.
You know, she believes in what she does.
Well, of course she does. That's the problem. She believes in it so intensely she can't hear anything but the beat of her own drum. She's not the only one. I know that. A lot of women feel the same, but nobody goes about it like Susan. She doesn't spare herself, and if you happen to be around her, your life is sure to be disrupted somehow.
Maybe she'll end up in jail. She always wanted that.
Maybe she will. Are you through?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Well, may we know what your findings are?
Certainly. I have to fill out a form that the court gave me. You know, they have a form for everything. But I'm afraid I've forgotten my pen. May I trouble you for the use of one?
Certainly.
I know exactly where it is. I was changing jackets this morning because I knew it would be hot today. I took the pen out of the old jacket, set it on the dresser, put on this new jacket, walked out of the house, but forgot the pen completely.
Here you are.
Thank you. I thought it best for everyone to know the shape of things. Rochester, New York, July 24th, 1873. I have made diligent search and can find no goods or chattel, land or tenements with which to answer the judgment against Susan B. Anthony. E.J. Kenny, Deputy Marshal. If you'd care to read it.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Keeney. Thank you.
This is what I shall deliver to the court. Thank you for the use of the pen.
You're welcome. What does this mean, Mr. Keeney?
It means that I won't be calling again.
May I ask why?
Why what, ma'am?
You took the briefest possible glance at the bedroom and my study, and then you came back down. You didn't even take an inventory. I can't help but wonder why.
That's understandable, ma'am.
Do you have an explanation?
Do you remember that speaking tour you made before the trial? Those 21 cities?
Of course.
How many people do you think you spoke to?
Hundreds, possibly 1,000 or more.
One of them was my wife.
I see.
I'm an officer of the court, man. There's only so much I'm allowed to say. But I can tell you this. My wife came home that night with a new hero. Good day, ladies.
Good day, Mr. Keeney. Thank you.
Apparently Apparently, his heart wasn't in it.
Apparently not.
Excuse me, Susan, Mary,
What is it, Mary?
I really have to leave. If you have no objection, I'm gonna go tell Charles
Telling what?
that you won't have to pay the fine. If I can get to him to the paper in the next 15 minutes, he can have it in this evening's edition.
Do you have any objections, Susan?
No, go ahead, Mary Ebard, tell your husband.
Thank you, he will be ecstatic.
Goodbye, Mary. Men don't seem to be able to get any money out of you, Susan. Judge Selden didn't ask for his fee. Mr. Keating couldn't find anything to sell to pay your fine.
Thank God for kindred spirits.
Whoever they may be. What's wrong?
I feel at loose ends, Mary. I've had this scrape with the legal system. I survived, but I feel that it ended badly.
It ended. Be grateful for that.
But I came away with nothing to show for it.
If nothing is the best you can manage, accept it.
But I feel so absurd. Like Don Quixote tilting at the windmill that he took for a giant. His lance got stuck in the blades of the turning mill and he went sprawling.
Don Quixote, the knight errant, sallying forth to right the wrongs of the world.
He was a silly old fool who had read too many books.
There's nothing wrong with reading too many books, and there's nothing wrong with sallying forth for those who can do it.
I would gladly sit and be still if only this thing were done. Why does it take so long?
Because it does. But Susan, everything changes eventually. Even glaciers move.
Glacially. At this rate, by the time women get the franchise, I'll be dead and gone. And so will you. Don't you want to see it?
Of course I do. Don Quixote wasn't a fool, and his quest wasn't pointless. Neither is yours. But you might consider choosing your windmills more carefully.
It's simple justice, that's all it is. Women won't know what the franchise is until they've had it. But they may reject it, that's their choice. People refuse what's handed to them all the time, but at least they will have had the chance. We've got to think and think and think some more. When a thing doesn't work out, we've got to come up with something else. There has to be a way to make this work. Fail is impossible.
Impossible, Susan?
Impossible.
I am afraid I don't know what that kind of certainty is like.
I have to believe it, Mary. If I didn't, I could not get up in the morning. I could never have gotten through all the setbacks. So many. Legislators who listened politely and told us to put our petitions on the desk where they died. Abolitionists who made a common cause with us, brothers in arms, until the amendments gave them what they were after, and suddenly we were quits. One thing after another. No sooner did the founders say, "We the people," than they hastened to add, "We do not mean all people."
Democracy in moderation.
Democracy denied.
Plato said that democracy is a degenerate form of government. It's only slightly better than tyranny. He said it produces rulers who know how to sway the masses but don't have the vaguest idea how to rule.
Degenerate or not, it's what we've got. And we need to be part of it. I will not rest until we are.
Stubborn natures survive.
We do. But we can be troublesome.
Oh, you can. But there's use in that.
What's the use?
It keeps the rest of us from getting comfortable. I used to think it was the balanced people who take the ship where it needs to go. I was wrong. Most of us are so overwhelmed, just trying to keep it afloat. Mama, the house, the Madison Park School, tucking in loose ends that insist on coming back out. We manage to keep everything going after a fashion, but only as it is, not as it should be. It's the single-minded people, like you, who put all of their energy into a single task and lay everything else aside until it gets done. Those are the people who make the future. Without them, we'll go shambling along forever.
I could never do it without you, Mary.
Oh, of course you could.
No. You make everything possible. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have a family or certainty or a place to lay my head between my silly adventures.
Your adventures aren't silly. Windmills have to be tilted at. Otherwise, giants will rule the world. Nobody will challenge them. Everything will continue as it has been, no matter how wrong or short-sighted or unjust. Nothing will change.
I suspected that I served some kind of purpose.
You certainly do.
If only I knew where to turn next.
I have an idea.
What is it?
Taxes. I pay them. Not many women do, for that matter, not many men. Those who are taxed are supposed to be represented by fellow citizens of their own choice. That's what the founders said, even if they didn't mean it. I'm taxed, well taxed, but I am denied the right to choose my representatives. Therefore, I am not represented.
No, indeed.
For as long as I can remember, I've always been told that a woman is covered by her husband. She lives under his protection. Everything she has is his, including her vote. I don't live under any husband's protection. The only one who looks out for me is myself. I run my house, I pay my taxes, I deserve the right to be a citizen.
Of course you do.
I noticed an item in the paper yesterday. 2 sisters in Connecticut, homeowners, have refused to pay their property taxes.
I know them. Abby and Julia Smith. I met them both 3 years ago at the Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association. I wondered how they were doing.
Well, the article says they have one of the biggest tax bills in the town where they live, and they're refusing to pay it because they're not allowed to vote. They're giving speeches, they're talking to reporters.
Good for them.
There's something else. One of our teachers reminded me this year, 1873, is the 100th anniversary of the most famous tax revolt of all.
The Boston Tea Party.
Exactly. Why not celebrate it with a women's tax rebellion?
How would you do that?
Refuse to pay. Send the bill back.
And what will you do when the tax collector comes to seize your property to pay? Would you risk the house?
Oh no, not as long as Mother is here. She depends on me.
Even if you won on principle, the only ones who'd be helping are the women taxpayers, not the rest of us.
It was an idea.
It was a good idea, Mary. Every idea is good, even the ones that don't work out. But you have responsibilities. Wait for the circumstances.
All right, Susan. I'll wait. What will you do?
I'm not quite sure. I have a little time, the time that I won't have to spend raising money for Mr. Keeney's fine. I'll write some letters. I'll write to Mrs. Stanton. She is never at a loss for ideas. If we're thinking, we're trying. If we're trying, eventually we will succeed. Failure is impossible. What is the world going to do with people like me, Mary?
What will the world do without people like you? I'll get your writing materials.
Thank you, Mary.
Our ship of state carries 2 engines, gentlemen, and was built for them. But heretofore, you have used only one, and now you have reached the place where 2 seas meet. All ocean currents are struggling together for the mastery. The man-power alone will not save you, but put on the woman power, and our gallant ship will steady itself and ride the waves triumphantly forevermore.
Mrs. Isabella Beecher Hooker. Testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Washington, D.C., January 12, 1872.
Impossible, Susan.
Impossible. Rochester, New York, July 24th, 1873. Dear Mrs. Stanton.
Writes down in